Who is the best non-QB in college football for 2026? I'm going to take a look at the highest favorites to win the Heisman if it's not a quarterback. Look, we all know that the Heisman Trophy is normally a quarterback award. We haven't seen a non-quarterback win the trophy since 2020. That's been a while. Before that, it was since 2015. It's been a really long time since we've seen a non-quarterback win the Heisman. But if it is going to be a non-quarterback this year, who will it be? We'll take a look at that. And then after we talk about the best non-quarterbacks, then we will talk about the best college football games for the 2026 season. I'm going to give you my top 5 games that I think will have the most impact, the most storylines, the best games, the most must-watch games in the country. We will break it down here on Scoring from the 50. And then at the very end of the show, stick around for the Wisconsin program spotlight. Okay, we're going to look at how Wisconsin has gotten to where they are and if they can turn things around. But before we get into it, I've got to make sure I ask you guys to go down and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Tell me your thoughts on the show down below. Tell me who is your top 5 non-quarterbacks. Who could win the Heisman if it's not going to be a quarterback in 2026? But without further ado, let's get right into the show. Okay, the top non-quarterbacks in college football. My number 5 player is going to be Caleb Hawkins, okay, the running back that just transferred from North Texas to Oklahoma State. I don't think enough people are talking about this guy, okay? He had 1,434 yards and 25 touchdowns last year. Both were top 5 in the country, okay? He is one of the best running backs in the country, easily. I do have another running back further up on this list, so he's not the best running back, but he's going to be one of the best running backs in the country, especially in an offensive system that he already knows under Eric Morris, going to stick with that quarterback that already knows with Drew Mestemaker. The offensive line is going to be improved. The team around him is going to be improved, and I think he will only get better. And that's why I have Caleb Hawkins at number 5 in my non-quarterback rankings. Now at number 4, I have Colin Simmons, the only defensive player on this list. Okay, he had 12 sacks last year, so he's already really good, and he's only going to build off of that. He's going to be a junior. This should be his last year in college football, but he is an insane talent. He's going to be a huge player for that defense, especially because that defense did lose a lot from last year's team. A lot of seniors or a lot of transfers on that team. Of course, you bring in a guy like Rasheem Piles at the linebacker position as well to replace some of that. But a lot of that is going to put more pressure onto Colin Simmons, and I think he's going to have to come through in a big way if Texas wants to get to where they want to be for 2026. And then my number 3 player is going to be another running back, Quan Lacey, the Ole Miss running back, 1,567 yards last year, 3rd in the country, and then 24 touchdowns, which is good enough for 2nd in the country. That is a really good player, because I think that Pete Golding is really going to want to lean into the run game next year. Look, they lost a few receivers, right? So I think that's automatically going to force them to run the ball a little bit more. But a lot of defensive coaches, which Pete Golding is, like to run the ball a lot. He's not the kind of guy that knows route trees super well. He's not the kind of guy that's going to really be able to throw the ball down the field like a guy like Lane Kiffin was. He's a big offensive guy, offensive genius, one of the best offensive coaches in the country. I just don't think Pete Golding possesses that. So I think that they're going to run the ball naturally a little bit more. And because I think that they're going to want to rely on that defense. Of course, Pete Golding, he's a really good defensive coach. It's how he got the Ole Miss head coaching job. He's a big defensive guy. So I think that they're going to want to rely on that defense a little bit more and run the ball to Quan Lacey. Give Quan Lacey the ball. He can just go out and make big plays here and there. They don't have to throw the ball downfield a ton because they have a guy like Quan Lacey who's going to be able to run the ball extremely well, going to have those big plays and replace those big offensive plays that Lane Kiffin used to always have, right? Give the ball to Quan Lacey and he's going to make something happen. He is the best running back in college football, and he's going to prove it this year in 2026 for the Ole Miss Rebels. And then number 2 on my list, we're getting down to the top 2 non-quarterback players in the country. My number 2 player is going to be Malachi Toney. Okay, my top 2 players are wide receivers, and just by saying that, I know you can guess my number 1. But let's focus on Malachi Toney for a second. He's a really good receiver. We all talked about this. The best true freshman in college football last year. He had 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. Really solid. That's really good for a freshman year. Look, that doesn't sound like any ungodly numbers, right? For a freshman, that's really good. For context, Jeremiah Smith, the best quarterback in the country, who is number 1 on my list, we'll get to him in a second, only had 30 more yards than him and 12 touchdowns, so only 2 more touchdowns than him. If Malachi Toney's already producing 1,200 yards, close to Jeremiah Smith numbers as a freshman, he's going to be able to get to Jeremiah Smith numbers as a junior, as a senior, if he sticks around that long, which I doubt he will. But Malachi Toney, he's one of those guys who you just got to get the ball in open space. He can make a guy or two miss every single play. He will make at least one guy miss every single play. He's one of those dudes who plays a lot like Tyreek Hill. Whenever Tyreek Hill was at the Chiefs, all we had to do, I'm a big Chiefs fan. You see Kansas City right there, okay? All we had to do was get him the ball, and he'd make 2 or 3 guys miss every single play, and then that'd get us extra yards, get us a big play. That's what Tyreek Hill does in the exact same way that Malachi Toney plays. He just get the ball in open space, get the ball to him on screens, get the ball in flats, and then every once in a while he can beat you over the top with the speed because he's that fast and that twitchy, okay? He's going to have a huge year at Miami, especially because now getting rid of Carson Beck, which no disrespect to him, he was a pretty good quarterback, but I don't think he's anywhere near as good as Darian Mensah, the transfer from Duke. He's going to come in and make a huge difference on that offense. Not only are they bringing in Darian Mensah, but they're also bringing in Cooper Barcade, an 1,000-yard receiver from Duke as well. So that's not only going to take the focus off of Malachi Toney to Cooper Barcade, but they're also going to have a better quarterback to facilitate the ball to both of them. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends for that Miami offense. Then you throw in a guy like Mark Fletcher, who is also really good and coming back for next year. He's going to be a huge difference maker because then people can't just sit back and pass coverage the whole time. Mark Fletcher is also going to take pressure off of Malachi Toney and let him have those one-on-one moments more often so he can make bigger plays. And then last but certainly not least, my number one non-quarterback in the country. Look, you know him, you love him. It's Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State receiver. Look, I don't love him. I got a Michigan shirt on right now. Okay, look. National champs, by the way. Men's basketball national champions, by the way. Let's point that out. But back to football, okay. Jeremiah Smith, he's an insanely good receiver. You all know how good he is. 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns last season. He is an insane talent. He is arguably the best wide receiver talent that I've ever seen in my life. Julio Jones, right? That was back in 2015, though. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. Don't really remember him all that well. So Julio Jones is up there. Lots of really good wide receiver prospects, but I don't think I've seen one as good as Jeremiah Smith. He can make any play. You have to double team him every single play. You cannot leave him on his own or else he's going to hurt you over the top. That's why that offense was so good last year, and why I do have questions going forward for that offense into 2026 on Ohio State, is that they had Carnell Tate to make up for Jeremiah Smith, right? Jeremiah Smith is always double covered. Not that he was playing bad. That came out as he was playing bad, but he was always double covered, so he wasn't open all the time. Then that opened up Carnell Tate to get one-on-one matchups, and he was so good that it didn't matter. He was almost just as good as Jeremiah Smith. So Carnell Tate had a big year, right? Because all of that attention was focused to Jeremiah Smith. Will Ohio State be able to do that next year? Probably, right? It's Ohio State. They always have good wide receivers, but they did lose Brian Hartline, and they lost 2 5-star receivers to Notre Dame. So we'll see if they can improve on that wide receiver room. I think they will. Of course, it's Ohio State. They always have receivers that are always really good on the offensive side of the ball, and they also have Julian Sand coming back, who is going to be a really good quarterback, a Heisman contender. That is going to be a really good offense, just as always. But that is the one question mark that I do have. If Jeremiah Smith is double covered, do they turn to someone else? And if they can't, do teams just solely rely on focusing on Jeremiah Smith, take him out of the game, make them beat them some other way? Then Jeremiah Smith might have a quieter year than he has in the past. Not sure how that's going to go, but again, a ton of potential for Jeremiah Smith. The best wide receiver prospect that I have ever seen, and probably one of the best wide receiver prospects that you guys have ever seen either. So really, really, really excited to see what he's going to do, continuing his development into another year for that Ohio State offense. Now let's take a look at the best games for 2026, most impactful, biggest storylines, best teams. Any one of them will fit this criteria, okay? Now, every single list, in my opinion, going into the next season, most watchable game, the must-watch game of 2026 is LSU traveling to Oxford, Mississippi to take on the Ole Miss Rebels on September 19th. Okay, this is going to be one of the craziest environments that you guys have ever seen. Okay, that fan base and that team wants to beat LSU more than anything. I'd be curious, I'll probably text one of my Ole Miss friends, would he rather win the Mississippi State Egg Bowl or would he rather win the LSU game? I think that is a really big question. If you are an Ole Miss fan, tell me your thoughts down below. Who would you rather beat, LSU or Mississippi State going into next season? That's going to be a big game, right? Look, we all know the talking points around Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss not halfway through the season, but pretty close to almost done with the season, right? Going into the college football playoffs, leaves the team left for dead, goes to LSU for more money. He's probably getting paid better. He's probably going to have more resources. We'll see. But I think that Ole Miss definitely has the resources to go and compete with an LSU. That's why Ole Miss has been better than LSU the past 3 or 4 years, because they do have good enough resources. They do have enough money to go and compete in one of the best conferences in the country, okay? So not only do they have the team and the resources to go and beat a team like LSU, they also have the it factor in that game. The crowd will be 100% behind that Ole Miss team. That team will play their absolute hearts out in that game because everyone knows the stakes. You could go into that game and not say a word about Lane Kiffin, and I'm sure Pete Golding will actually probably do that. He seems like the type to just, you know what, we're not going to focus on all that stuff outside of our locker room. We're going to focus on us, right? I don't think he's even going to mention Lane Kiffin's name. I don't think he's going to mention anything. I don't think he has to. I think that team will know what's at stake. That team will 100% know what's at stake that game. Pete Golding doesn't have to say a word. That team will know what's at stake. Pete Golding won't have to say a word, and they will get up and play their absolute hearts out for that game. So that is a must-watch game, okay? All the storylines going into that game are going to be crazy. Make sure that you have your appointment TV set for September 19th to watch LSU and Ole Miss. Now, 2 Ohio State games in a row here, so forgive me if you're a Michigan fan. I kind of don't like talking about it either, but here we go. Ohio State is traveling to Texas early in the season, November 7th, and the question that I have for this game, are we going to see a similar theme to this game as we did last year? Look, last year, going into the game, we saw exactly what those two teams would become. We saw a Texas offense that struggled. The quarterback was a little iffy. The O-line was terrible, but the defense played really good. And that was a theme throughout Texas' entire season, okay? They did get better towards the end, but most of the season, the quarterback struggled. The offensive line was nowhere near good enough, but the defense would play really, really good most of the time. For Ohio State, it was a very similar thing. They didn't run the ball a lot. They should have ran the ball a little bit more, but the defense played really, really, really well. Both teams showed us exactly who they were in that Texas and Ohio State game to start the year. Do we see something similar in week 2 this year? Are these teams exactly what they're going to be for the entire season in this week 2 game? That's the biggest question that I have for this game, because if that's the case, I think the loser of this game probably will end up missing the playoffs, because Ohio State has a really, really, really tough schedule, probably the hardest schedule in the Big Ten, and then Texas has a really tough schedule as well. We all know how good the SEC is. You have to play a really good team every single week. I don't see a way that if that is true, if it is true that how the teams look in week 2 in this game go on to be the exact same teams for the rest of the season, I don't see a way that the loser makes the playoffs. It'll be the exact same story that Texas had last year. So that's the biggest question for this game. If both teams can grow, Texas could have grown off that. They could have looked at being like, okay, our offense is the problem. Let's hone in on that and fix that. I'm sure they did. It just didn't work, right? If they can fix things, if the loser of this game can fix things, then this will be a game between 2 college football playoff teams. If not, then the winner will probably go to the college football playoff, and the loser, I have a tough time seeing make the 12-team playoff. And then my second Ohio State game in a row. This one's at home against Oregon. And look, November 7th, the next 3 games that we'll talk about, this one and the next 2, the next 3 games are all on November 7th. So really, just take the day off of work. If you work on weekends like I do, you got to take Saturday, November 7th off, okay? That is going to be the best weekend of college football this season. Oregon at Ohio State, late in the season, November 7th. Does the loser of this game still have a chance at the Big Ten title? Are these teams undefeated in the Big Ten going into this game? I think if they are, then both teams could be in the title race for the Big Ten. If not, if one of them has one loss, if both of them have one loss, then certainly the loser of that game will be out of the running for the Big Ten championship. So that is why that game is so important in the Big Ten. Now, nationally, National College Football Playoff, right? What does this game have impacts on? This game is going to play a huge factor into the college football playoff. Like I just said, Ohio State has one of the hardest schedules in the country. They probably have the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. I don't see a way that if they lose this game, that they can be a top 4 seed, okay? If they lose this game, then they can only lose one other game. If they lose both of these games against Texas and Oregon, they're not going to make the playoff because they have such a harder schedule than just these 2 weeks that I'm sure that they're going to lose another game at some point. So if they do lose both of these games, I don't know if Ohio State's going to make the playoff. But if the College Football Playoff Committee finally goes off of the best teams and not just the best records, then yes, a 3-loss Ohio State team could make the playoffs because the schedule is that difficult. But I just don't know if they're actually going to do that. We've been talking about it for years, them actually switching to a best team versus best record. They're two different things. You would think in the NFL, you look at it as best record equals best team. That is not the case in college football. So if Ohio State does lose both of these games, then I don't know if they're going to make the playoff. That's whenever I start to question if they'll make the playoff. Now, for Oregon, they don't have as hard of a schedule. They don't have as hard of a schedule, but I think losing this game would probably get them out of contention for the Big Ten. Nationally, I don't know how much this will hinder them in the playoff race. Look, you can lose 2 games. It's been pretty well documented that you can lose 2 games unless you play an absolute abysmal schedule like Notre Dame did last year. You can lose 2 games. You just cannot lose more than 2. That's why I think that Ohio State, I don't know if they get in if they lose both of these games. They have to win at least one. Oregon, I think they have to win this game just because this is going to be one of their only difficult games on the schedule. They don't have to play that hard of a schedule. It is going to be difficult. It is the Big Ten, right? But this is one of the only games that you have to prove it in if you're Oregon, and I think that if they can do that, then they will become a national title contender. Now, the second game of November 7th is going to be Miami at Notre Dame. Okay, we all know the playoff implications that this game had early in the season last year, right? Miami wins that game. Notre Dame ends up winning the rest of their games, and then they still missed out on the playoffs. This game is going to be November 7th. Completely different vibes from last year. Last year it was like, okay, Notre Dame lost, but they got to turn it around. They have a ton of time. They can get things turned around. And then they did, but it just wasn't enough at the end. Miami and Notre Dame are playing late in the season this year, and I really worries me that the loser of this game is going to be done. Okay, Miami and Notre Dame, both of them have very easy schedules, but if Notre Dame loses 2 games again, I don't think that they should make the playoff. I don't know if they will, right? Depends on what everything happens around the country, but every other 2-loss Power 4 team that is in contention for the college football playoff should get in over Notre Dame because Notre Dame's schedule is that bad. So that makes this game a must-win for Notre Dame. If they don't, it's going to be really tough to get into the playoff. For Miami, it's one of the only harder games. Look, you're playing in the ACC. Is there any other ACC team that's going to challenge Miami this year? Clemson? No. Florida State? No. SMU? Maybe. Probably not. I'm not sure if the winner of this game is going to be able to make the playoffs because it's so late in the season, okay? Miami is playing at Notre Dame this year. I also think that's going to have a huge impact on this game. Notre Dame at home is always a lot better than Notre Dame on the road, which it was on the road last year. So if the winner of this game is having a good season and having a really productive season and winning games and not losing games against teams that they shouldn't lose to, then I think this will be perfectly fine and both teams should possibly make the playoffs. So interesting stuff about Miami and Notre Dame. If both teams can win games against teams that they should win against, then both teams will be fine for 2026, and this game should be a precursor to a college football playoff game that we see later in the season. And then last but not least, the Georgia at Ole Miss game, also on November 7th. Again, that day is going to be a huge day of college football. Cannot wait to watch all 3 of these games, and I'm sure there's plenty more on November 7th going on. It's like the early November games. Usually there's really good weekends in there. So we'll see if these teams can live up to the hype and if they can have really good seasons going into these games. But Georgia and Ole Miss, it's going to have huge impacts on the SEC race. I think these are 2 of the best teams in the SEC. Ole Miss has a ton of talent coming back. We talked about Quan Lacey earlier in the episode. Trinidad Chambliss is a top 5 quarterback in the country, in my opinion. He can make any play. And of course, we did just see this game in the college football playoff last year in the quarterfinals, and it was an insane game. If it can be anywhere near as good as a game as that was, then it will be an absolute thriller. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, they have a really good team coming back. The defense is going to struggle a little bit. The wide receiver room is the biggest question mark on that team. They lost Dylan Bell and Zachariah Branch. Do they regress back to what they were in 2024? They could not catch a football, okay? Georgia, if they can catch footballs, then they're going to have a really good season. If not, then I question if that team will be really anywhere near competing for an SEC championship if they can't catch the football. But Gunnar Stockton's coming back. Feels like he's been there forever, but of course it's only his 2nd year starting. He's going to be really good, extremely solid. He's Mr. Reliable in my opinion. That is going to be a really good offense. And then facing that Pete Golding defense, oh my gosh. And then Kirby Smart defenses, oh my gosh. It's going to be a defensive battle, a pitcher's duel. Cannot wait to see that game. I think it's going to be really close and have huge impacts on the SEC title race. And finally, let's get a little bit negative in the show, okay? I don't like ending on negative notes, but sometimes you got to whenever you're focusing on the Wisconsin football program, okay? In the past, 7-6 in 2022 for Paul Chryst last year. They end up firing him, didn't have a good season, but they bring in a guy like Luke Fickell, and there's a ton of momentum building within that program because Luke Fickell, going into this job, was one of the best coaches in the country, okay? He had just brought Cincinnati to the college football playoff, the only group of 5 team to make the college football playoff in the 4-team era. He was a really good group of 5 coach, but it's been a struggle to translate that from the group of 5 up to the Power 4, because in 2023, I mean, you're not expecting a lot in his first year. He goes 7-6. They do make a bowl game, but you're wanting a jump in year 2, especially with the transfer portal. 5-7 in 2024, and then it just gets worse. 4-8 in 2025. Really, really, really struggling there in Madison, Wisconsin, that football program. But, you know, props to them. Recently, the athletic director has talked about how much they failed to fund this program. They did not give them enough money in the beginning, and I think that they are able to recognize that, but it just hasn't shown up yet. Look, they are flipping the roster right now. 27 players out of the team, 24 players coming in. Tanner Koziel is the only 4-star, which is why I'm saying, you know, I haven't seen the money come through in a big way yet because they only had one 4-star come from the transfer portal. He's a tight end. They are ranked 63rd in the country in transfer portal rankings. Now, you do look at Tanner Koziel, and you look at him and thinking, okay, if we have enough money, we can get guys like Tanner Koziel. He can be kind of a statue in a, hey, look what we can do if you give us money. That is a kind of player that we can get if we're funded, if we're given enough money, given enough resources to go and win football games. We can get guys like Tanner Koziel, but they need to get more players like that. Look, they fortunately do have a decently easy schedule this year. Their home games are Notre Dame and USC, which isn't going to be easy. Notre Dame, very early in the season, week 1, that's going to be a really big litmus test to see if this transfer portal roster can come in and really make a difference. But again, it's 63rd in the country, so I really don't know how much better that team is going to be this year. And then they also have to play USC, who's going to be a really tough game. I'm assuming that's going to be a loss. And then they also have to go to Penn State, but their second hardest away game is Iowa, which also will probably be a loss. But again, Penn State, Iowa, Notre Dame, and USC. Look, there are 4 games that are all really, really tough, but other than that, it's a lot of teams that they can beat. A lot of teams that could be worse than last year, and if they are worse than last year, then I think Wisconsin has a decent shot to beat them, because I don't think Wisconsin was a 4-8 bad team. I don't think they were that bad. They had a really tough schedule. They had to play Alabama in the out-of-conference. They had to play all of the big schools in the Big Ten. So maybe Wisconsin wasn't as bad as we think. You know, they are bringing back a lot of players. Okay, look, going forward in the future, they did have a few decent recruiting classes the past few years, but it got a little worse here at the end. But, okay, so in 2024, 22nd best class in the country, but they did lose their best player. Xavier Lucas was that dude that they had a bunch of, you know, lawsuits with and all that whatever stuff going on. He ended up going to Miami. He leaves. Dylan Johnson is coming back. Can he have a big year? I think he's going to be a really big player for Wisconsin. He could have a really big year if he can take that next step. In 2025, they probably had their best recruiting class. It is ranked 27th, but, you know, looking at the players they had, you look at a guy like Nicholas Clayton. He headlined that class. Top 200 recruit at edge rusher. He's going to be really good. I'm really hoping he can take that next step. But the guy that I'm really excited about, Mason Posa. He was a top 200 linebacker in the 2025 class. He had 61 tackles and 4 sacks just in his freshman year. A lot of stuff to build off of, and it's going really positive for that recruiting class. But then you get to the 2026 class, and it's... Is that right? Does that look right? It says 65th in the country in the 2026 recruiting class. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. If you're a Wisconsin fan and you're looking at people talking about, yeah, we're gonna fund the team, we're gonna give enough resources to Luke Fickell, and we're gonna turn this thing around, we're really gonna succeed. Then you get 65th in recruiting class. This is according to On3, by the way. If you want to go check it, it's on On3. 65th in the country. That's abysmal. That's abysmal. That's not going to win you games. That's the kind of job that you do whenever you're a group of 5 coach that can't translate to recruiting big, high-end talent at a bigger school. That makes me really nervous if I'm a Wisconsin football fan. They only had one player in the top 500 players, according to On3. One player in the top 500. That's like group of 5 level of recruiting. That's really, really, really not good. What are they doing with all the money that they're supposedly giving that football program? 63rd in the country for the transfer portal, and then even worse, 65th in recruiting. If they're supposedly funding this program and giving Luke Fickell more money, where's it going? Because it's not going to players. I mean, this is bad. This is really, really, really bad if you're a Wisconsin Badger, man. I don't see a way to get it turned around. I don't know if Luke Fickell is going to survive another year. Look, I give a ton of respect to Luke Fickell. He got a group of 5 team to the college football playoff in the 4-team era. That is something that was not supposed to happen. Not supposed to happen. The 4-team playoff was supposed to be exclusive to the big brands so they can make more money. Nope. Not whenever you got Luke Fickell. Not whenever a Cincinnati team is that good and as good as they were. Man, I think he's a great coach. I just don't know if Wisconsin's the best place for him. Wisconsin has to be able to fund this program. Wisconsin has to be able to pay players. Paying players used to sound like a really bad thing. You used to use that as an insult. Like, oh, this team's doing good just because they pay all their players. They got money under the table. They're just doing dirty stuff right now. No, you have to be able to pay your players. You have to give your players, if you want the best players in the country, you have to be able to pay them as the best players in the country. So I just don't see a way that this program works out. I think Luke Fickell might be a really good coach. I just don't know if he's going to survive another year in Madison, Wisconsin. So again, I hate to end this show on a negative note. I just don't see a way that Luke Fickell gets stuff turned around at that Wisconsin football program. That's going to do it for our show. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. I love the support that I get on my podcast. It means the absolute world to me. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. What do you guys think is going to happen with this Wisconsin program? Can Luke Fickell get stuff turned around? If not, tell me why not. Tell me everything you think down below in the comments. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again next week.